season. My oh my, he's got one early.
Here on Sky Sports News, bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. And joining us are Miguel Delaney, chief football writer at The Independent, and the Times football reporter Charlotte Dunker. Welcome to you both. Let's quickly run everyone through the back pages. We're going to start with the Sky Sports News website. The game at St James's Park, definitely one to remember, and Liverpool's 16-year-old match winner, the focus on the website. The front of the Times, Charlotte's paper, goes with a headline of "Remember the Name" regarding the champion teenage sensation. They also report on Arsenal's move for Piero Hincapié on the right there. Telegraph reflects the red card showed at Anthony Gordon at St James's Park and depicts the damage his challenge did to Virgil van Dijk. And away from football, the Telegraph focuses on Tommy Fleetwood's first win on the PGA Tour after 164 starts. They call him a model of grace and patience in a sporting world that doesn't usually celebrate those virtues. But we are going to start with the Monday Night Football on the front of the Times. Remember the name, Miguel Delaney. Rio and Gumoa. It's bizarre, isn't it? All the money, all the transfer sagas that we've talked about, and up pops this lad 3 days short of his 17th birthday, signed, I think, from Chelsea last year. It would have been one of those inconspicuous signings, and he pops up to win a game amidst all the stars.
Yeah, one of the persistent glories of football after a young player. There's always a young player to come through. Not many as special as this are talked about in the way he has. And that can also kind of just, because it wasn't just, of course, about the quality of the finish, brilliant as it was, but the timing, the context. And I suppose, I mean, even the way he's wrapped that up, we're talking about a game of the season already, aren't we? Because it's not just, it's the storylines that went into it, the way the goal scorers, right down to Ikatike, reflected the storylines. And then for all that to come together, and first of all, a comeback, the intensity of it all, the way Newcastle are pushing, and then the kind of the vintage storyline of, well, not just a teenager, but a mere 16-year-old scoring the match winner. And what a goal it was to win it as well. I mean, we can get into bigger questions about, you know, how Newcastle left so many players there, the kind of emotional intensity of the game, but the dummy, the finish, yeah, an incredible occasion, I have to say, incredible night of football.
Yeah, I mean, it's just striking us here, Charlotte, that, you know, we've already done a bit tonight on Max Dowman, and there's these youngsters that are just coming through. They seem to get younger and younger. Certainly, as some of us get older and older, it's quite frightening. But a brilliant kind of storyline out of what was a chaotic game, as we kind of expected, given the tensions beforehand. It was a crazy Monday Night Football.
Yeah, it was crazy. And I think, like you say, it was sort of expected. There was that needle from the beginning, wasn't there? The co-owner had tweeted, which I think he then deleted, get into them. And I think the Newcastle players sort of took that a bit too literal. I think if you look at Anthony Gordon's red card, it was rash. It was ridiculous, wasn't it? What was he thinking? He obviously just wanted to win the ball, pressing so high against Van Dijk, and they had no choice but to send him off. And unfortunately for Newcastle, that looked like it was going to change the game. Liverpool obviously went 2-0 up, and what a fight back it was from Newcastle. They showed that heart that maybe was what got them in trouble in the first place. They didn't seem to use the brains. Well, definitely Anthony Gordon didn't. They were flying, and there were so many fouls in the first 45 minutes, so many yellow cards. Just seemed inevitable someone was going to get shown a red. But what a crazy game, and what a picture that is. He just looked absolutely delighted, didn't he? I think sometimes it's so hard to... Football can sometimes seem a bit sterile, but the emotion from him that he showed, and like you said, 16 years old, just shy of his 17th birthday, and you speak to people at Liverpool, and he was one of the standouts of the pre-season tour. Slot's already been speaking him up. When Luis Diaz was sold, they said, oh, it doesn't matter that much because we've got this young talent coming through in Rio and Gumoa. He's definitely going to be one of the options. And you think, yeah, okay, he's 16 years old. I'm sure you can't really rely on this guy. And then he comes off the bench on his Premier League debut and scores with a finish like that. The composure, everything about it was absolutely unbelievable. And what a frantic finish to, a crazy, crazy game.
Yeah, I mean, Charlotte there, Miguel, talks about the emotion that he showed when he scored. I mean, the emotion of the game from start to finish. at times was in danger of kind of overshadowing the football. Certainly, as Charlotte said, the first 40 minutes, the tackles that were flying in, obviously Gordon's red. Liverpool made some fairly rash challenges as well. There was a lot of bite to it, but at times it was almost too frenetic. But it did result in a fabulous ending.
Well, I mean, look, that's what makes football. And in fact, it's often people go on about technical perfection. And, there's obviously been this debate about a certain way of playing over the past few years. But it's often, mistakes or errors that actually make games. And they come from high octane stuff, which this was. Now, along those lines, I would say that Newcastle's great strength in this game was also their weakness, in that the intensity obviously helped them put it up to Liverpool. They started really strong, and that was, of course, where the Isak issue. It's amazing we've gone, we're 6 minutes into the show. It's the first time we actually mentioned it. But had Isak been there, you would have thought actually Newcastle or some striker like Isak been there, Newcastle could have actually pretty much they could have capitalised on an openness from Liverpool in the 20. They didn't though, and then it was like they were caught out. I don't want to say ran out of steam because they did recover it, but then and obviously that intensity, it was the source of, I would say, the red card. People could ask about whether it contributed maybe to some of the kind of physical issues they suffered, and obviously led to a brilliant comeback. But then it was like, and I was even when it was 2-2, and it was in the 94th minute, I was talking to a few people in football about this. This is one of those real stick or twist moments for Newcastle. Do they go with the emotional intensity of the game and try and win it? Or do they just kind of sit back, even kind of someone goes down, waste a bit of time, sit in a 2-2. It didn't feel like they controlled it, which is a little bit of the story of the game. And ultimately, they get caught. I mean, as brilliant as the goal was, it was just striking how one dummy basically opened up the entire box. Now, I know Newcastle had the 10 men, but it was still suddenly so conspicuous that their entire 18-yard box opened up. But still, what a finish to take it.
Yeah, I mean, they were open at the back, Newcastle, but Charlotte, Liverpool were open as well. I mean, given that they were down to 10 men, Newcastle, I mean, Jamie Carragher was at pains before the start of the match to talk about the Bournemouth game and how open Liverpool were and the fact they want to play this front foot kind of attacking football and maybe go for it perhaps even more than they did last year, and they were called out. So, and Alexander Isak, had he been playing, and Miguel's right, we did go 6 minutes without mentioning Alexander Isak, but had he been playing, or had they had a recognised centre-forward right from the start, it could have been humbling for Liverpool tonight.
Yeah, it really could. I thought Newcastle actually looked really dangerous going forward, especially Anthony Elanga, who was putting loads of dangerous balls into the box. And like you said, if that Isak figure had been there, I think they would have taken the lead. But obviously he wasn't. And we all thought that he was going to be the main talking point of tonight, and someone else has gone and stolen the headlines. But all the focus around Liverpool's transfer activity for this last week of the window that we've all been talking about is clearly Isak. But I think you look at, like you say, how open they are and how defensively fragile they've looked in these opening two games. Mark Gay is obviously still one of their transfer targets, and it opens to the question as should they be pushing more to try and get him rather than Isak, a player who is going to look difficult to try and get over the line in the last week. I mean, you look at, the defensive fragility that we've seen from Liverpool in those first two games. Maybe he could sort that out. I think Konate has looked vulnerable in the first two games, and that's probably a fair way of describing his opening two performances of this Premier League season. So is that something that Liverpool can do, try and shore things up at the back in the last few days of the window? Be interesting to see if they go back in for another bid with him.
Yeah, we don't want these teams shoring things up at the back, Miguel, do we? We want them to keep signing attacking players because we want more games like the Monday night football. Just on Isak, I don't know if the cameras were probably hunting for him, trying to see if he was watching anywhere in the stadium. But how do we think this is eventually going to play out in the last week of the window?
Well, I suppose this is where the timing of this fixture was all the more interesting, not just because it falls right as this saga is reaching a peak, but also, of course, because it actually brings the two clubs together in face-to-face in a way that maybe some people might have been trying to avoid. Because obviously Newcastle don't want to sell this player. There's been that one bid from Liverpool so far, and suddenly they're thrown together. And there was all sorts of murmurs before the game about how kind of executives would try and kind of calm things down a bit, and if it is a bit calmer, then maybe they can have some sort of dialogue. I mean, look, it's impossible not to imagine that they spoke about the transfer. I mean, like it's hanging over everything. I mean, like my gut is still that Isak's statement last week tilted things and not in the way he'd wanted. I think that maybe kind of forced Newcastle and their owners think conspicuously into a bit of a corner. Emotional pride came into it, and I would have said today, I don't think there's any chance they cede. Maybe after today, after the game went, maybe that'll only embolden people or harden positions. But like it's I suppose it's possible that constructive discussion has taken place. But still, when it comes right down to it, this transfer, there's two break points really. One, Liverpool actually have to make an offer that's acceptable to Newcastle, and it's going to be high. And the other side, and I actually think this is where it's more difficult. Newcastle have to sign forwards that they deem suitable. And the suitability is maybe the big question there, because they've already lost some players who, had they might have considered selling Isak, but those figures are dwindling as we get closer and closer to deadline. So my gut is still that, despite maybe how constructive talks were today, if they took place, that Isak actually probably stays. But you might play this on next Monday evening and it'll sound a bit stupid.
OK, well, Charlotte, just on that, I mean, Jürgen Strand-Larsen, Wolves rejected the £50 million bid for Newcastle, so that was one potential replacement. That still might have its course to run. Johan Wissa as well. These are people who would seem keen on a move to Newcastle, but Newcastle kind of can't get them over the line. So in your experience, if it doesn't happen, firstly, how disappointing is that they can't get those replacements in? But if it doesn't happen and the window does slam shut with Isak at Newcastle and Wissa at Brentford, how do managers reintegrate these players, if they can, into a squad?
Well, he's an asset, isn't he? And I think we all saw today that having him on the pitch would have made a huge difference. So they'll have to sit down, they'll have to have these clear the air talks, they'll have to hash it out, and they'll have to be reintegrated. I think the reaction at first from the fans might be a bit difficult, but if he starts scoring goals, which we all know he can do, I'm sure they'll quickly get over it. And in terms of the players that they're looking at, my understanding from Wolves' perspective is that Strand-Larsen, they don't want to sell him in the final few days of the window. He's too important for them. He's not for sale. Will Newcastle go in and test them with a higher bid to test their resolve? We'll wait and see, but definitely from Wolves' standpoint at the minute is that Strand-Larsen isn't for sale. They've obviously lost Cunha, they've lost Aït-Nouri. They were the two highest goal scorers for Wolves last season, so to then go and lose their number 9 after they've lost their 2 opening games as well, then yeah, it's a tough one for them to take. So I think they will stand by that. So can Newcastle go and get Wissa? Do they need 2 centre forwards to bring in to let Isak go? And as Miguel says, are Liverpool going to go in and put that higher bid in? So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out in the final week. But if he does remain at Newcastle, I've got no doubt, we've seen it before in the past, that the manager, the players, they all get back together, the relationship will be rebuilt and they'll get over it.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of down tools, Miguel. They desperately kind of push for a move, and then if it doesn't happen, there's this frantically kind of scrambling around to try and save face. Can you see that happening in the case of an Isak and a Wissa? Wissa obviously took his stuff down from Instagram, didn't he, with any kind of mention of Brentford, and that he might have to kind of go back on that. We'll see those pictures start to reappear on Instagram, perhaps.
Look, as you could say, toxic, I suppose, as maybe the Sagas have got this summer, they still haven't gotten to the levels of Tevez. They still haven't gotten to the levels of Suarez. Both of those players came back. Tevez won a title, and Suarez had his best ever season, certainly his best ever season in England. And like as someone in football said to me, there is an element in the game where you could actually do and say almost anything as long as you just then come back and score a few goals and win some games. And no matter how bad it's got, it just helps everything clear. And that's why you can see, as difficult as it seems right now, there's always a path out of this.
Yeah, well said. OK, we're going to leave it there for the time being. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll look at more of the sports stories in the morning papers. The Sun's back page reports on the Monday Night Football, as we've seen. And at the top, they focus on Arsenal's next transfer target. More on that next.
Lovely done it, Moa!
You're watching Back Pages tonight, and welcome back to Miguel Delaney and Charlotte Dunker. Right, we're going to get straight back into it. Charlotte, we're going to start with your paper, The Times, the front of it, and talk Arsenal. We'll talk transfers. We're a week away, obviously, from the end of the window. Arsenal target £52 million. Hincapié. I mean, it feels like they've had a very good window already, but still keen to strengthen. What do you make of it?
Yeah, it's been a very busy window for them, hasn't it? They spent, I think it's 200 million on new signings. This is, he's got a 52 £1 million release clause. And Arteta's obviously looking to add strength in depth as well, isn't he? But with all this money that's being spent also comes with, I think we spoke about it last Sunday on the show, it comes with pressure because they're trying to just get those final pieces of the jigsaw together to get over the line to go from second to being champions. And when you spend this much money in one window, like Arsenal have done, and they're showing no signs of stopping with a week to go until the window closes, there will be that expectation that bringing these new faces in, bringing this extra strength in depth, bringing some extra talent in should be the difference to get them over the line and push them closer to the title this season. Obviously, they play Liverpool on Sunday. It'll be interesting to see where these two teams fare against each other so early on in the season. But yeah, it looks like another new signing might be coming through the door at Arsenal of what's been a really busy summer window.
Yeah, it's another massive game. They keep coming thick and fast, don't they, at the start of this Premier League campaign. The back of the sun, Gunners to cap it off. Miguel, I mean, Charlotte's point on pressure is a very valid one. There's also an argument is that you can have too many players. I mean, we've seen that teams in the past do particularly well with small squads from time to time, and I know they're going to fight on all fronts, there's Champions League and everything else, but there are teams who are really stockpiling players here.
Yeah, well, look, Pep Guardiola, who Arteta worked under for years, his preference is always a small squad. Arteta has actually preferred a smaller squad over the past few years, and he's really used kind of a core 14 or 15. Now, he finally felt the cost of that last year when suddenly 2 or 3 players get injured in clusters and Arsenal left short. And it does feel like a lot of their business this summer, obviously some of it is a response to what they've missed before, like a striker, but it also feels like they're really prioritising depth. And I think that's all the more important in a campaign now where the Champions League is basically a parallel league campaign. It goes right through the season into January and all that. That's where they could see the benefit. But also there is a kind of almost a psychological difficulty of kind of keeping a squad whole. And I mean, I was speaking to people around the Arsenal training ground the last week, and it's talking about how, like, you know, some of the players using different parts of the pitches or training because there's so many players. It's close to the old joke about the Chelsea dressing room. And there's another element that's surprising about it, I suppose, as well, because even before the Eze signing, it had been kind of floating around that Arsenal preferred to sell before signing Eze. So if we're to bring in another defender now, without yet selling someone, unless in the situation where this is going to be a deal that's done late in the window as they try and move out players before then, I think it creates a little bit of pressure as well, not just in terms of actually winning now, given how stacked the squad is, but pressure in the market, because like clubs know you're coming, I suppose. And I actually think a big theme of the last week of the market is going to be, say, clubs like Fulham, clubs like West Ham, who still want to do a lot of business. And I think they're looking at potentially dropped prices for a lot of the players that, say, the wealthier clubs suddenly want to get rid of. And there are a few of them, with Arsenal now being the club with the most need.
OK, we are going to move on to, the mirror, the back of the mirror. We're going to talk Max Dowman. We talked Rio and Gamoa, Charlotte, didn't we? And Max Dowman has really been pulling up trees, and another young player who's impressing. Wayne Rooney says Team Max is living the dream.
Yeah, what a debut it was for him. Obviously, we've just spoken about Ngamoa and 2 teenagers taking the headlines on just the second weekend of the Premier League season. And if anyone knows what it's like to be a teenage sensation breaking into the Premier League, it's Wayne Rooney. So I'm sure he's got some lessons for him and also the people around him, because it's just about keeping him grounded. But when you've got people like Theo Walcott, I think, has already compared him to Lionel Messi. So, I mean, that's one way to get the hype up for a 15-year-old, isn't it? And hope that his ego doesn't get out of control or anything like that. So, yeah, I mean, it was a brilliant cameo from him, wasn't it, winning that penalty? And he's another one, like we said about Rio Ngamoa, impressing on Liverpool's pre-season tour. Anyone you spoke to that watched Arsenal on pre-season, it was all about Max Dowman and how impressive he was. And I think Rooney tells a story on that podcast about how his son Kai came up against him and how difficult he was to play against and how impressive he was. So he's impressing everyone in all circles of football. And as we saw his cameo off the bench, he's definitely not fazed about playing in the Premier League. So yeah, another teenager who should be exciting to watch.
Yeah, Wayne Rooney's been speaking to the media today, it would appear, because he's also the back of the sun. And this is Rooney's warning to Ruben Amorim, basically saying, Miguel, no excuses now. You know, he's made some signings. He's got in the likes of Cunha and Mbumo. It's time to start delivering.
Yeah, and yet still, I'm not necessarily sure I go that far, because it's like what was so alarming actually about that Fulham performance, even though it's a 1-1 away draw, it was just the nature of the display. they're really lacking in midfield. And it does, I mean, I've actually written today in The Independent and in the newsletter we do that it maybe caused them to go back in for Belieber because like they struggle to win the ball and then they struggle to keep it. And I think ideally Amorim would want an athletic player who can carry the ball to the pitch and also a deep-lying playmaker. And like I think United would in the far future want that maybe to be Belieber and Wharton. But right now it's created a need for someone like Belieber. But of course Brighton, they're not a club who, I mean, no one's not for sale at Brighton. They just have a price they have to hit. They don't tell you what that price is. And it's up to United whether they go in that strong. But then, of course, if they do that, we are talking about huge expenditure. Now, it could be argued that Amorim is, and I think it's a fair argument, that Amorim has taken over a club that is at the end of, a decade of recruitment without kind of shape, without direction. And they have to make these changes. But equally, I mean, like I remember hearing a story last year that Liverpool really liked Amorim. But they realised that to bring him in, they'd basically have to spend 500 million to reshape the squad for what he wanted. And that's pretty much what United are doing. So while I wouldn't go as far as Rooney, maybe, he's sort of right putting to the level of expenditure and getting a lot of what he wants. OK, Charlotte, we're talking midfielders at Manchester United. I know you've done a bit on this regarding Kobbie Mainoo. We've talked Dowman tonight, we've talked Ngumoa. Kobbie Mainoo was very much the kind of young player coming through at Manchester United. What's happened to him and where do you stand on this?
Well, it's interesting because obviously what Miguel says in terms of what Manchester United need at the minute in midfield, Kobbie Mainoo can definitely offer some of that. And when they were searching for a winner against Fulham, he was again an unused substitute like he was against Arsenal. So it's clear that Amorim really doesn't see him fitting in at the minute in those two midfield positions. He wants someone more defensive, which obviously started with Casemiro and then Agate, and then it's been Bruno Fernandes who's been the more attack-minded midfielder he's playing. And Amorim said in his post-match press conference yesterday that basically Kobbie Mainoo's behind Bruno Fernandes in the pecking order. Well, if you look at how many games that Bruno Fernandes hasn't played for Manchester United in the Premier League since he joined the club, you're talking 10. So if that's what Kobbie Mainoo's got to do to get in the team is to displace the Manchester United captain, then he is really, really going to struggle for minutes. So he is a talent. If you go back to when he broke onto the scene, everyone was talking how great he was. Scholes said he was better on the ball than he was at that age. He won the FA Cup. He's definitely got the attributes that Manchester United need in midfield. So it's going to be interesting to see. They obviously play Grimsby in the League Cup on Wednesday night. You'd expect him to start that game. Can he go and make a statement? Is he going to be trusted more maybe to play alongside Bruno Fernandes in that midfield pivot? It's going to be an interesting one to go and see. But as Miguel said, Manchester United definitely still look lacking in that area of the pitch.
And if you missed any of the show, there's another chance to see Backpages tonight at 1:30. And the show is also available as a podcast. Just download Backpages on Apple, Spotify or wherever you get your podcast.